Good morning. And may I, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, welcome all the officials here this morning. First of all, from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the Ministry of Community Development, Culture, and the Arts, the National Commission for Self-Help Limited, members of the media and members of the public. My name is Wade Mark, and I'm the chairman of this committee. May I advise that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to examine the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the National Commission for Self-Help for the period 2008 to 2015. Our committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the National Commission for Self-Help in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to address these challenges. The role of the committee is to help the National Commission for Self-Help improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. At this time, I will invite my colleagues on the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee to introduce themselves. Starting on my immediate right, I'll invite my colleague to introduce himself.
Good morning. Welcome to all of you. Tim Gopi Singh, Vice Chair of this committee.
Good morning again to everyone. My name is David Small. I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning and welcome. Nian Gatsudoli, member.
May I ask my colleagues on my immediate left?
Thank you kindly, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Baptiste Primus, a member of this committee.
A very good morning. Special welcome to you all. Fitzgerald Hines, committee member.
Thank you very much. May I now proceed to invite the others who are here with us, that is officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the officials from the Ministry of Community Development, Culture, and the Arts, and the National Commission for Self-Help, in that order to introduce themselves. So the Ministry of Finance first.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Yvette Baba. I am the Acting Director, Social and Economic Transformation, Investment Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, Chair and all members. My name is Kemkaran Kisoon. I'm a Senior Audit Analyst with the Central Investments Committee, Investment Division, Ministry of Finance. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Kimberly Pascal, Acting Business Analyst, Investments Division, Ministry of Finance.
Ministry of Community Development, please.
Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Yes?
Sukhdev Sankar, Planning Coordinator, Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Yes? We now go to the National Commission for Self-Help. Could we ask those officials present to introduce themselves, starting with the chairman?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Edgar Zephyrin, Chairman of the National Commission for Self-Help.
Yes?
Good morning, everyone. Janice Phillips, Administrative Head, National Commission for Self-Help Limited.
Good morning, everybody. Nicola Humphrey Hamilton, Head of Finance, National Commission for Self-Help Limited.
Yes. Those in the back, please.
Good morning, all. Vincent Graham, Director, National Commission.
Yes?
Good morning, everyone. Anisha Khan Hamid, Internal Auditor, National Commission for Self-Help.
Yes? Who again?
Good morning, Larissa Alexander, Grants Coordinator.
Anybody else?
Good morning, everyone. Gary Rumain, Senior Project Officer, National Commission for Self-Help Limited.
Senior, you are what? You're a senior project?
Senior Project Officer.
Right, senior project officer, right. All right. There's someone missing. Could somebody advise me? I think that one of the persons who would have been invited, I should say, to this meeting is the corporate secretary, legal advisor to the Self-Help Commission. Is that person here? Mr. Chairman, you can respond.
Chairman, I understood this morning that she is not able to attend. This was conveyed to me. I haven't spoken to her directly.
Is there any reason why this corporate secretary is unable to attend?
I'm not sure, Chairman. Can I ask through you whether the administrative head is able to share any light on that?
Yes?
She indicated yesterday via email that she did not get any formal invitation.
Is that she didn't get any formal invitation from who?
Chairman, only members of staff, the management team was informed of the meeting today.
Would you want to advise us who was supposed to? My information is that we invited the company to advise us who they would like to attend this meeting. And we got a listing from the company, which is the National Commission rather, for Self-Help, and the name Ms. Kendra Thomas Long, Corporate Secretary, Legal Advisor, is on the list that was submitted by the National Self-Help Commission, advising this committee that this person would be part of the delegation or the team coming here this morning. So that is the basis on which we know the person was invited, but based on what we have been told, apparently she did not get an invitation, even though the name was submitted. I understand there's no name here, but it is the administrative head of the National Self-Help Commission.
So in which circumstance, the administrative head having submitted the name of the corporate secretary, is the administrative head saying this morning that the corporate secretary, in light of that, was not specifically invited?
All members of staff was invited via email. The correspondence went out to all members of staff.
On that list were formally invited by you. And you submitted their names to us in those circumstances.
I did, sir.
And you are now reporting to us that the corporate secretary told you that she did not receive that invitation. Have you been able to check that before coming here this morning?
I have emails that could be submitted to you all where the invitations went out. That could be submitted subsequent to the
So it is not, from your view, it is not a reasonable position, perhaps not a truthful position, to say that for the corporate secretary to be heard to say that she was not invited. That cannot be true. No, that cannot. All right, thank you.
Could you advise us when was the letter or email issued as an invitation to the persons who are here this morning and the person who is not here as well?
Chairman, I don't have the exact date with me, but I could forward it to you subsequent.
But could you remember when it was done? Was it yesterday, you said earlier?
No, that invitation would have gone out from the first invitation to the committee to attend this committee meeting.
And there was no reminders after that? This week.
Secretary?
Correct.
Thank you. And I trust you should just forward that as well to the chairman.
Chairman, if you...
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, I think before we proceed this morning, clearly we have to establish who heads this organization. I'm hearing responses. I know the chairman is here. Good morning, Chairman. And the administrative head. Who is heading this organization? Because that's the person whose responsibility it is to ensure that the entire team is invited, they are aware, and they are here. I would not want us to perceive that a corporate secretary is refusing to come before this committee. I'm getting that impression. But we need to clarify who is the head of this organization.
May I invite the chairman to clarify for us?
Yes, Chairman.
Who is the effective head of the National Commission for Self-Help?
At present, currently, Chairman, the organization is headed by an administrative head. It is fair to say that the substantive position of CEO, the post holder, is on administrative leave. And Mrs. Janice Phillips Lynch is currently the administrative head. She's the effective head of the organization.
Yes.
Chairman, may I add, in light of what has been said about the communication, I wrote to Mrs. Lynch on Monday night as chairman, saying that I'd like to meet with all the senior staff who were involved in this process yesterday. The email was copied to Mrs. Thomas Long, among other people. She did not attend. I'm sorry, she did not attend.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if the CEO is on administrative leave, the normal process is for someone to be appointed to act as CEO. Could you advise us as to why there is not an acting CEO in place at the organization?
Chairman, through you, may I say that the decision of the board was that position be the acting be entitled administrative head. There were lots of discussions at the board meeting, and the board decided at the end of the day not to go with the appointment of an acting CEO. I think principally because the board hadn't envisaged over what period of time this acting might continue, and therefore decided to have an administrative head who essentially takes responsibility for all the day-to-day functioning of the organization.
Just also follow up on what Mrs. Jennifer Primus Batiste asked a short while ago. I looked at your document, and members, I'd like you to look at this document. It is the strategic plan for the self-help, Appendix 2, 2014-2016, interim strategic plan, 2017, and draft plan for 2018-20. On page 23 of this submission that we have before us, there is on the organizational chart the post of Chief Executive Officer. There is no post. You talk about an administrative head. That's
Yes,
all?
Chairman, may I say that there is no post listed there. The board saw this as an interim arrangement, a short-term arrangement.
No. What I'm saying is that the board has to be guided by policy. The board cannot whimsically, arbitrarily, or in any kind of whimsical way create posts. That is not your purview. You have to get approval for these things. What I'm saying is that the organizational structure that the board of the self-help, the board of the National Commission for Self-Help established and was approved has no position called administrative head. And you are telling this committee that the board thought it fit, given the fact that the CEO is on administrative leave, to create a post called administrative head. That is what you're saying.
That will have to be the conclusion, Chairman.
Did you get the approval of the line ministry? Did you get the approval of the permanent secretary in the line ministry? Or did you inform Corporation Seoul of this development?
The board acted in the belief that it could create that temporary arrangement.
But how can the board operate in that manner? You cannot operate with the belief that you can do something. You have to do something on the basis of policy. And if there's an absence of policy, then you seek approval from your line ministry through the permanent secretary, and you also communicate with the Ministry of Finance on that matter, because you are creating a post that your board would not have rather the responsibility of so doing. So tell me, how did you get this authority?
I think the board will say that it has acted within the ambit of the State Enterprise Manual.
Well, listen, we have the members of the Investments Division of the Ministry of Finance. You have all heard, Mrs. Yvette, Bob, and your colleagues, what has been told to this committee. Can you tell us if the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual gives to any board, it doesn't have to be self-help, but does it give to any board, and can you point out to us in that manual where the board has the authority to create a post on its own without the approval of the line ministry, the Ministry of Finance, and the Cabinet of the Republic of TNT. And then ultimately, the CPU, of course. Can you advise us if that is in the manual as the chairman is advising us?
Chair, I would like to say the normal policy is that with respect to creation of posts, the line ministry has to approve it. Right? But the investment division, the state enterprises performance monitoring manual does not specifically deal with state that and deal with that. But that is the normal policy with respect to creation of, like, for instance, the organization chart. If you want to change it, you're supposed to get the approval of your line ministry.
Yes,
Chairman, my experience and my experience in the public service span more than 30 years. In order to create positions, the PMCD plays a critical role. PMCD would look, examine the proposals from the organization or the line ministry, because it has to go from National Commission to the ministry. The permanent secretary would then send it across to PMCD. PMCD will go through their processes. And at the end of the day, PMCD would say, we agree to the creation of these positions. And at the end of the letter always states, you have to go to cabinet. And when you're going to cabinet, you must attach the PMCD's proposals and approval for the creation of those positions. I am sitting here, Mr. Chairman, my chairman here, and Mr. Chairman of National Commission, and I am stunned at what I'm hearing. No board has the authority to change, create positions, and, well, the next natural question to me would be, did the board assign salaries to these positions? I would like to know that.
Chairman, one of the problems I think that state enterprise agencies face is that the manual itself is silent on so many of these issues. And I have not observed any formal way of communicating these policies to a new board when it takes office. That has been an issue, so that you only find out after a decision has been taken. The documentation given to boards, as far as I'm aware, is a copy of the state enterprise manual. As the officer has admitted, it is silent on many things.
But
to answer, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, may I ask, just to follow up on Mrs. Batiste Primus' statement, was a salary and other conditions established when this new post was created, so the administrative head of the organization would now be working for so much in salary and other terms? And who would have established and approved those terms and conditions?
Chairman, when we got into the commission in 2015, we found a practice of allowances for acting appointments existed within the commission. I think it's fair to say the board followed that in respect of this post which we are talking about now, and attributed an acting allowance to the holder of the administrative head position, as we had said it. That was the procedure used.
All right, I'll recognize Mr. David Small. David.
Chairman, good. Thank you very much for allowing me. Like my colleague here, I am incredulous at what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing here is unbelievable. What the chairman is suggesting to this committee is that the board acted in the belief that they were doing the right thing. We've heard from the Corporation Soul from the Ramazelli Investment Divisions, that if you are creating a position, she was very clear, you need to get the approval. And I did not hear from the chairman that he got that approval. So from where I sit, any such appointment is null and void. Null and void, because if he didn't get the approval, it's acting out there in another world. My concern, Adam, Mr. Chairman, is that you've created a position, you've put an officer in it, you've created terms and conditions, and we can't find a position in the structure. So I have nothing against the officer sitting here personally, but something has gone terribly amiss. And we are trying to understand what is really going on at this company. You have the administrative head is wonderful, but who manages the day-to-day business of National Commission for Self-Help? Because as you've stated in your words, and I recall it very well, this person is managing the day-to-day business of the administrative responsibilities, accounts, admin, HR, good. But who is in charge of running the company? I would like to understand who's in charge of running the company, the business of the company, set aside, because if you look at how the company is structured, you receive money for recurrent, which is really to run the administrative part of the business, and then you receive capital funding to do the work of the business. Who is running the company?
Chairman, it's fair to say that the company is run on a day-to-day basis by the person that we've designated, rightly or wrongly, as the administrative head. The board, of course, takes over.
Mr. Chairman, I want to stop there, please. Mr. Chairman, I have a huge difficulty here, because if we go by what the chairman's statement earlier, the administrative head is running the administrative parts of the operation, and now the chairman is changing that to say that, no, this person is also effectively performing the CEO's role, then something is wrong. Because by your own admission, you've stated one thing before, and now you're saying something else. And I want to treat it one matter. I myself have served in the civil service, Madam Minister and Mr. Chairman. It is not my understanding that people who are in contract positions can access acting allowances. That is absolutely not allowed. It is absolutely not allowed. And if that is a practice, that somebody in the organization needs to say, you're on contract. Contract officers in any state entity are not entitled to receive acting allowances. So that is my understanding. I would like to get that clear from the team here at the Investments Division. I want to make sure my understanding is correct. If I am incorrect, please advise me. Ms. Barb, please.
Chair, that has always been an issue, and I think we will have to get better guidelines from the CPU.
What is your understanding?
Well, what is normally said is that persons who are on contract don't get acting allowance, but that has always it always comes up from time to time with state enterprises where they will put someone in an acting position. But as I said before, even though these things are done, you must inform your line ministry and get guidance from them and approval from your line ministry.
Can I just in your information and the data you receive from National Commission for Self-Help, have they advised you that they're paying these acting allowances?
I cannot recall at this point in time. I'll have to check to see.
Please, the committee would like to understand in any communication from National
I'll have to check
to the ministry. Please, could you, through the chair, please supply the committee that. Mr. Chairman, I will stop here for now.
They come in. It is an appropriate time to ask Mrs. Angela Edwards, who is the permanent secretary, Ministry of Community Development, Gender and the Arts. Could you shed some light on this development? And could you advise this committee if your ministry and you as permanent secretary is aware of these developments, creation of a post, assignment of salaries to that post without, well, the knowledge of even the investment division. So maybe you can help us on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman, this information was brought to the ministry in 2017. The ministry subsequently wrote to the National Commission for Self-Help, advising that the last approved organizational structure was in 2014, and that cabinet approval had to be sought before any additional positions could be created. That was the response. There was no response to that from National Commission for Self-Help.
I'll call on Dr. Tim and then Mr. Hines.
Following up on that, Madam Permanent Secretary, your letter to the National Commission of the Self-Help Commission, when that was sent to them, was there any follow-up to have an understanding and appreciation of what was done based on your communication to them?
Yes, member. This communication actually took place with the former CEO, who is currently on administrative leave. The follow-up was really through conversations, and we were advised that he had brought the matter to the board, to the attention of the board, but no decision was taken in terms of reversing the decisions to create the position.
And that occurred over what period of time?
It would have been during 2017. The correspondence we would have sent would have been around May 2017.
So it's approximately a year and still no solution to the issue?
No,
I heard you mention the CEO is on administrative leave. Could you give us an understanding? We're getting from the answers that the administrative head is now in a position of taking the responsibility as a CEO of the organization. Where is the CEO? And what do you mean by administrative leave? Where is the CEO? Probably the chairman could give some help to this.
Thank you, member. I think the chairman is most appropriate to respond to what is administrative leave. That's the information we have in the ministry.
Chairman, administrative leave is a terminology now used for suspension on grounds of disciplinary grounds. So the CEO is on suspension at the moment, if I may use that language.
And may I ask then, Mr. Chair, if you'd be kind enough to consider answering the issue of the reasons for the suspension and by whom, and when was that done?
I can give you the headline answer, Chairman, but the kind of details that the member asked, I would request the approval to submit those in writing. If I may use a broad terminology, the CEO is suspended on disciplinary grounds. A number of charges, I think, are involved in that suspension.
So was that a board decision?
It was a board decision.
And you, okay, and the other issue is this a matter now that is sub judice, that is the CEO has put the board into, has taken legal action against the board?
The CEO has taken legal action against the board. He has sued us for breach of contract.
Okay, thanks. Just one more, Chair, before I hand over to other colleagues. The chairman alluded to the Appendix 2 that you all submitted to us, which is the National Commission of Self-Help Strategic Plans, and the Interim Strategic Plan. And on page 11 of that document, projection for fiscal years 2014, 15, and 16, page 11 of 58. Yeah. If you please. Are you with us now on that? You would see that the projected recurrent expenditure from 2014 to 16. In 2014, it was about 19.9 million for recurrent expenditure. 2015, 18.5. 2016, 24.7 million. There is a jump of about $6 million for recurrent expenditure in 2016. What would account for that in terms of, were there more personnel hired? What is the reason for the increase in projected expenditure for recurrent?
I think, Chairman, I may seek the assistance of the accounts unit here, but there has not been a jump in expenditure on recurrent activities. As a matter of fact, we've consistently...
But I'm seeing it here, 24.7 million.
Unless it was a projection.
A projection.
Yes.
So in reality, it was...
No, in reality, we were over consecutive years, we've had 1 million deducted from our recurrent expenditure.
All right, thanks.
Just a point of clarification on the board decision to send the CEO on leave. Are there board minutes reflecting this decision by the board?
There are board minutes.
And are these board minutes sent to the minister?
The Chairman, we are supposed to send all board minutes to the minister. I am not aware if we are up to date on all of them. I know that we had to be scolded by the minister at one time that we were late in submitting minutes. The particular, I'm not sure the particular aspect of those minutes were included in the ones sent out by the corporate secretary. But I can affirm that there are board minutes, and those can be submitted at short notice.
I'm just on a point of clarity. Do the board minutes of the meeting at which the decision was taken reflect a decision by the board to send the CEO on leave?
Yes, it was a unanimous decision by the board.
Well, then I'm going to ask the question to the permanent secretary. Do you have in your possession the minutes of that board meeting at which the decision was taken?
Member, at this point, no, we do not have the minutes of that particular board meeting. They are minutes we have been searching for and requesting.
May I intervene, Dr. Dolly? When was that decision taken, Mr. Chairman?
I think the decision would have been taken in July of 2017, Chairman, subject to a month here or there. Could have been June, but I believe it was July.
We are therefore requesting that you submit those minutes of the board meeting that took that unanimous decision to send your CEO on leave. You are, under our standing orders, invited to submit.
Chairman, may I, through you, sir, please change my language somewhat. I did use the term unanimous, but the term should have been majority.
All right. Whether it's unanimous, majority, make those minutes of the National Commission for Self-Help available to this committee through the Secretariat. And we would ask you to do that before the end of this week. Friday, submit those minutes. I think, before you go on, Mr. Hines? Okay, go ahead.
Just to complete that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Zephyrin, could you make those copies, which you ought to have been doing, available to the permanent secretary, all your minutes, and to the honorable minister? Why were they not done? And that is a normal under the operating guidelines for state enterprises. This is a routine issue. And as chair, you must understand that you have to take some degree of responsibility for it. And why was this not done?
Yes, Chairman, through you. The position is that if the board was discussing below the line a confidential matter, it would then, if officers would have been the subject of that discussion, it would have then relied on a member of the board to take the minutes of that particular section of the meeting. I think this is where the problem has arisen, where sometimes they are not written up on time. But there are minutes, and I give the undertaking that they will be submitted.
But, so what are you saying to this committee? That your minutes, when you took that decision, took how many months to be written? How many months? Because this decision was taken, according to you, in 2017. Was it around June or July? Is it July you told us a short while ago? Was in July. So how long does it take for minutes to be established, to be written up, and to be circulated to the line minister, to the Ministry of Finance, as an example?
8 months.
Chairman, I can understand why you say it may have taken months to write the minutes. I just wish to assure you that it did not take months. They are there, and I will take the responsibility, as you have instructed, to ensure that they are circulated.
I am further instructing that those minutes that you failed as chairman to submit to the permanent secretary of the line ministry and the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Community Development be submitted forthwith. When you leave this meeting, please submit those minutes of July 17th, where you took the decision by majority to send your CEO on what you call administrative leave. So this is an instruction coming from this committee. Okay? I now ask Minister Hines to intervene.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chairman. Quite apart from the specificity of the July 2017 board minutes, the performance manual dictates that minutes must be routinely forwarded to the permanent secretary and to the Ministry of Finance and, of course, to the line minister, very routinely. So apart from the specificity of the July minutes, all subsequent board meetings ought to be, and if that is not being done, there's a very gaping and embarrassing hole here. But I wanted to ask, reverting to earlier matter, since Ms. Janice Phillips, administrative head, is effectively, according to you, Mr. Chairman, performing the role of the CEO, and since you told this committee that you had created a position, created a salary for it without consultation with, well, let me ask, in terms of creating the position that we discussed earlier and the remuneration for same, did you do so in any consultation with the permanent secretary and or the Minister of Community, Culture and Development and the Arts?
It is not my recollection, Chairman, that there was pre-consultation on this matter. So the answer would be no. But I think I made a statement earlier which I want to return to. And that is that it would be good if, for incoming boards, all policies which are not included in the manual can be advised to members of the board. Because the board was acting in a manner where it felt it acted within the state enterprise manual, and therefore it had, in the exigency that existed, where we had no CEO, we had to find a CEO. And that is a position that the board took.
You were operating on the principle that silence is consent.
No.
Now, well, yes, because if you, according to you, if the manual was silent on the matter, you then decided on the basis of that silence that you would, as a board, unilaterally make, and I don't think it is silent, but in any event, based on your thinking, you thought, since it was silent, that you would act as a board unilaterally without any consultation with the accounting officer, without any consultation with the line minister, and to arrive at a decision affecting money. You know, even in the parliament, if I may just say so quickly, the Senate doesn't vote on the budget. No taxation without representation. They say these are money matters. and the permanent secretary and the minister ought to have had an opportunity. So you decided that that was not the case. Let me ask one other question here now. Well, is it that the board decided that Janice Phillips will act as the CEO?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes. Was that communicated with the permanent secretary and or the minister?
I would have to see what happened next, Chairman. I can't recollect exactly what happened. There would have been communication to the agencies by Ms. Phillips. I'm not sure how, I'm trying to be as correct as I can. I'm not sure how they were advised of the decision that was taken. I need to do some
And
research.
that, Mr. Chairman, makes the point of the necessity for minutes and the regular routine conformity with the rules to send those to the permanent secretary and the minister and the Ministry of Finance. But one more thing. Did the board on this, is Janice Phillips remunerated in accordance with the function that you just said the board acceded to her?
Yes, the board took an approach, Chairman, and it was a decision of the board, which was that Ms. Phillips would assume responsibility for administrative matters.
Yeah.
They sought to divide this thing in a kind of a way.
Yeah.
It said that with regard to the finance head, that person was to report to the chairman. That was the decision of the board. It then talked about how matters to do with the grants making decisions would be taken, that they must be referred back to the board through the chairman and so on. So I will have to refresh my memory on exactly how things
the
went
function
with
of the
regard to that.
CEO is effectively, based on what your most recent submission, the function of the CEO is split between the administrative head and the chairman of the Self-Help Commission, the National Self-Help. Would that be correct to say?
Well, given what they had decided with regard to the finance head, but what has transpired is that the CEO is the administrative head is the person who reports to the chairman for the day-to-day running of the organization. Some members of the board had felt that they didn't want the finance person under that temporary arrangement to report to the administrative head. And that is how they arrived at a decision, as quaint as it might be, but that was their decision. They arrived at a decision to have the finance person report to the chairman.
So again, I ask, effectively at the base, the role and function of the CEO has been split by the board effectively between the administrative head and the chairman of the National Self-Help Commission. Would that be a correct assertion?
It would not be unfair to say that, Chairman.
It would be a correct assertion. So that in that sense, the chairman of the board is performing the role of an executive chairman of the commission. Am I correct to say so?
Not in terms of his involvement, certainly. Essentially, what happens with finance is that we have a finance and investment committee. We have a chairperson of that committee. And if we need to discuss anything, we will have the two of us and the finance manager in the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I just comment all that I've just heard. I'm sure, I must say, this committee finds particularly troubling. I give way, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I have a quick question for the representative of the Investments Division, Ms. Babb. Is it your understanding that the directors of National Commission for Self-Help are non-executive directors?
Through you, Chair, basically, yes, but there are instances where the bylaws, some bylaws of the companies provide for executive and non-executive independent
But in terms of
directors.
this particular entity, what is your understanding of the appointment of the directors?
Normally, it's supposed to be non-executive.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to be clear, because that is my understanding. I always like to make sure that my understanding is correct. It's not based on a fallacy. So my understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that directors of the National Commission for Self-Help are non-executives. And on that basis, that means you have zero ability to have any of the staff report to you. Your role is oversight. Now, this is my understanding, and perhaps because I have spent a lot of time in oversight. Because what I've heard today again from the chairman is trouble, and I think the only thing the chairman hasn't said that would strike me is that in order to hire the best, you have to pay the best. Because some things are running away in the state enterprise sector, and we as a committee need to start to bring things back. So, Mr. Chairman, I fail to understand what does your phrase "report to" you mean. If you are a non-executive director, even the chairman is non-executive, from my understanding, what actually happens when Mrs. Phillips reports to you? As you indicated, she would report to you, and the person in charge of finance would report to you. Could you help the committee understand what happens when they report to you? We don't understand, because firstly, they should be reporting to the CEO. Okay? But seeing that by your own admission on the record here that these persons report to you, help us with what happens when they report to you.
Sorry. We've already established that the administrative head is performing duties in the main of the CEO. The arrangement on the approved organizational chart include the reporting arrangements is that the CEO reports to the chairman, who I confirm is a non-executive chairman. That is a formal approved arrangement.
I am just going, Mr. Chairman, on the oral evidence you presented today, so that I want to make sure that what I got, and I wrote it down, you indicated that the person in charge of finance reports to you. You indicated that the administrative head reports to you. So I am sure the Hansard would bear me out. So I am just trying to understand, based on your words, what you've told this committee, what occurs when the person in charge of finance reports to you? Because I don't understand. So I am asking you to help us with the actual things that happen, so that when someone comes to report to you, what is the basis of that? What happens? That's all we're trying to understand,
Well,
information.
Chairman, and I'm doing my best to give the information. In the case of the administrative head, we will discuss normal matters that she wishes to bring to my attention. We'll discuss how programs are running. All the issues that affect the commission. With regard to the finance head, again, we've had particular problems with debt management. We inherited a lot of debts, and we've been trying to cope with that. So we'll meet, we'll talk about how we're doing, how we're servicing the debts, what problems there are, what decisions there are to be taken at this level. I have to say, Chairman, we admit that we did take away the reporting arrangements from the CEO in this instance. That was the desire, and I'm not trying to back out of it. It's a collective decision. I was involved in it. I was chairing the board. But the board decided that they did not want the head of finance to report under the arrangement that we had created, given that we'd already created that arrangement. And the board said that that person should report to me. I'm not an executive chairman. I receive nothing commensurate with any measure which can define me as an executive chairman. I devote time to the organization. I expect all chairpersons do that because no chairperson can just come to a meeting and go home. It's a lot more than that. So, but I hear what's been said there this morning, and they are not, Chairman, through you to Senator Small, they are not falling on deaf ears. I hear what's being said.
Mr. Chairman,
Before you, Mr. Chairman, how often do your board meet? Is it, could you advise us? Could you guide us?
Yes, Chairman. The board meets once a month.
Once a month?
Yes.
How often are you in or on the compound of the National Self-Help Commission?
I would say certainly 1 day a week, but if requested, I'll be there more often.
If requested by whom?
But if there are matters that the head of the organization wants to discuss with me, I'll be there. If there are things for me to respond to, I'll be there. This week we were talking about about preparing to arrive, to come to this. And we had meetings on Monday, which I was involved in, and yesterday.
You said that you have been in the organization since 2015. That is as the head, chairman that is. Have you studied, or first of all, have you received a copy of the guidelines on the state performance monitoring manual?
Yes, Chairman, I have.
Have you studied it? Have you read it?
I have read it.
And even upon your consumption of the material within these pages, you still have not been able to fulfill a simple function or guideline, and that is making board minutes available to the investment division and the respective line ministries, which is on page 31, item 3.2, and specifically item 3.27, which states, and may I read, board minutes. Board minutes should be made available to the investments division and respective line ministries, and I mean here ministers as well as permanent secretaries, to ensure that the board is proceeding within the framework of the strategic plan and the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago policy decisions. Now, this is the manual that has been established, I would say, for close to 15 years. And you are in the system as it relates to 2015 to the present time. So you ought to be familiar with the state manual. And why, if you are familiar, would you have flouted the state manual? Meaning you have refused to supply the line minister with minutes. You would have refused to supply the Ministry of Finance Investments Division with minutes. And you ought to have known that that is a responsibility of your good self. It is not silent. This monitoring manual is not silent on minutes of board meetings. So could you explain to this committee, why have you done what you have done over the last 2 years on this matter, particularly when crucial decisions are being taken, the removal of a CEO of a company?
Chairman, lest it be thought that there was a willful refusal to submit minutes. Far from that. We had administrative issues with the minutes in the first instance. We were scolded by the ministry on one or two occasions about that. We have tried to adjust our behavior. Things have gotten a bit better, I think. Far be it for me to say, but I think we have been trying to deliver on a more timely basis. I must say that some difficulty has arisen where we've had to incorporate closed session minutes into the main minutes because those were taken by board members, as I said earlier on.
Minutes you're saying that minutes are taken by board members?
I said when we have a closed session, Chairman, for example. If
When you say a closed session, could you explain to this committee what you mean by that?
If we have a board meeting and then we want to discuss a sensitive matter which involves the staff, then we ask that they leave the meeting. At that time, the minutes are taken by a volunteer who is normally a director.
But what is the role of your corporate secretary? And you have a corporate secretary, not so?
Yes.
And your corporate secretary is supposed to be recording minutes. And that is not an ordinary member of staff.
No.
Are you telling this committee that the corporate secretary is also asked to leave the meeting?
At times, the matters involve that the board's discretion, again, it's a collective position, is that they would want to discuss certain matters to the exclusion of staff.
No, I'm asking you, would you share with this committee that at times the meetings, closed meetings, could be so sensitive that you may request that the corporate secretary retire from that board meeting?
That has been known to happen.
How many times?
I will have to come back to you on that, Chairman.
More than once?
I will have to come back to you on that.
You'll put that in writing for our
Yes,
committee?
Yes, somebody do.
I just want to ask another question, sir.
Yes.
The strategic plan. No, I have another question I want to ask. The administrative head of the National Commission for Self-Help, what is the effective office occupied by the current acting administrative head? What is the substantive office of the acting head? Senior projects officer. Could you tell this committee what allowances, if any, Mr. Chairman, what allowances, if any, would have been provided to the acting administrative head in order to carry out those functions of CEO or partly CEO, as you would say, part CEO?
Chairman, can I give you the breakdown? At some stage, I can tell you that the total salary paid to the person in that position now is $26,000 a month. The normal salary of the CEO is $41,000 a month. Sorry, I've been reminded it's $25,000 a month currently paid to the person acting in that position.
Are there any allowances added to that?
Not on top of the 25, but within that.
You have allowances. Could you give us a breakdown?
I will give you a
in
total
writing?
breakdown, yes.
Right. I also wanted to ask, yes, no problem.
Just for my own clarification, are you saying, Mr. Chairman, and this is what I want to get very clear, that as a consequence of the administrative head acting as she is, functioning as CEO, the company is paying her some additional remuneration for that?
Chairman, the company is paying additional remuneration to her basic salary as an SPO to perform the additional functions.
Yeah, no. She is a projects officer,
Yes, sir.
substantively.
Yes, senior.
She is senior projects officer. She is acting as your administrative head. And in addition to that, she is partly performing the role of CEO. You told us so earlier. Good. The question is Ms. Phillips being paid any additional remuneration for her acting partly as CEO?
Chairman, I think for the purpose of the discussion, we have to accept that the administrative head is the CEO, barring a few functions.
Can't do that, no.
I know you can't do that.
Chairman,
I know,
Chairman, we
I know.
can't
But I'm
accept
saying,
that.
I'm just saying to answer the question, Chairman.
Well, then answer it. Now you have said that,
answer
answer
the
it.
question.
We don't accept it, but you have said it. Answer, please.
And the allowance is factored in, again, on top of the standard salary paid to the senior project.
So essentially, the administrative head, acting as she is, performing part of the function of CEO, is being paid an additional sum for that purpose.
The answer has to be yes, Chairman.
Good. In which case, the decision to make that additional payment was also a decision of the board.
Yes, Chairman.
Without consultation with the permanent secretary.
Yes, Chairman.
And without reference to the line minister as a board.
Yes, without prior reference to either the permanent secretary or the line minister.
Well,
the board considered this an interim arrangement that it had to make in order to function.
And how long has this interim arrangement been in effect?
Chairman, the interim arrangement has been in effect for some 6 months now. We had hoped that the matter of the administrative leave would have been concluded some time ago. However, the matter was then taken to court.
And the court can take, well, the court, you don't have control over the time and the processes of the court. So this interim arrangement can go on well into the foreseeable future.
The court has given a date on which it's going to hear the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before, I just want to bring to your attention again the page 20, members, of the performance monitoring manual, and it states as a policy, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has agreed, this is the government, that the monitoring of wage and salary negotiations, the establishment and or revision of pay and other terms and conditions of employment of employees of state enterprises, including managerial staff and persons employed on contract, should fall under the purview of Ministerial Committee for Monitoring Remuneration Arrangement, which is a subcommittee of the Cabinet. Now, it means to say that there is a specific committee established by the Cabinet that deals with the monitoring of remuneration, of any acting arrangement, any improvement in terms and conditions, including managerial staff, and persons employed on contract. Are you aware of this policy?
Chairman, when we assumed office, we sought to meet with the CPO to discuss how we operated with regards to these matters. We had made several attempts. The CPO, and I need to check this with the office, we were advised that...
No, I didn't ask you all that. All I simply asked, whether you are aware as the chairman of this policy guideline as issued in the State Enterprises Performance Manual. Are you aware of it?
I'm certainly hearing it, Chairman. I have been through the manual. I have read it. One of the issues was that.
So you have read it, you understand it, but yet still you are in breach of it.
As I said, we have not attempted to commit any willful breach of any policy regulation.
Well, you may not have attempted,
Yeah.
but this is what effectively has happened. Because every policy of the manual that guides your operations that I have brought to your attention, you are in breach of every one of them. And I've only outlined 3. I have another one about the corporate secretary. There's the corporate secretary in the manual that makes it very clear. Page 15. And may I read, because we need to put this on the record. This is on page 15, item 2.2.67, the corporate secretary. The corporate secretary is an officer of the company, not an ordinary employee. Is an officer of the company. And in addition, he or she is responsible specifically for maintaining statutory and other records, including minutes of board of directors meetings and shareholders meetings. So this corporate secretary is supposed to maintain and record all minutes of the board of directors. And also register, to keep a register rather, of all board decisions. So you cannot arrogate unto yourself an authority that this manual does not give you. Meaning, you have committed yourself by telling us a short while ago that at times, and you couldn't remember how many occasions, you have asked the secretary, which is the corporate secretary, to excuse herself. And you have gotten a member of the board of directors to take minutes when the manual says the only person that is mandated to take minutes and to record minutes and have a register of all decisions of the board is the corporate secretary. So this is another egregious breach by your good self as the chairman, having read this manual of this document. Mr. Chairman, something is wrong with that organization. Something is definitively wrong. Here it is, the Ministry of Finance does not know anything about what you are doing because you have failed to brief and update and provide the Ministry of Finance Investment Division with minutes and decisions. Your line ministry and the permanent secretary is in the dark on decisions that your board has taken. The minister, who is responsible to the cabinet for this ministry and any entity like yours, which is a state enterprise entity, has to account to the cabinet, does not know decisions that you have taken, particularly serious decisions, removing a CEO. So it appears to where we sit that this organization has gone rogue. This is a rogue organization, and you are doing your own thing as the chairman, if I may come to that conclusion. And I'm very, very disappointed with what we have heard so far. And we have now started. We have now begun this journey. I want to just ask another question before I invite Mrs. Batiste Primus. Mr. Chairman, could you tell this committee, no, Mr. Tim will be singing after Mrs. Primus. Please tell us whether you are aware of a process. Well, first of all, should I ask, I'm going to rephrase. The strategic plan for 2018 to 2021, could you inform this committee what is the status or status of that strategic plan at this material time?
Thank you, Chairman. The strategic plan, as far as I'm aware, is not yet completed. We expect to have it within the next couple of weeks. There were a lot of difficulties in getting the plan, the drafting of the plan started. When we inherited office, there was a plan which took us until 2016. We then had a one-year plan which the Ministry of Finance agreed to accept, and we undertook to do a 4-year plan to take us forward. The procurement process for consultants to undertake the plan threw up a lot of challenges, and therefore we started much later than we wanted to. Hence, we're at a stage now where the plan is being finalized.
Would you care to share with us what was the procurement process? How was that conducted? And who ended up being the successful bidder and consultant to draft and finalize that particular strategic plan?
Through you, Chairman, can I either ask the administrative head or the audit manager to respond to the process, because I'm aware that it was undertaken.
Chair, the first draft of the strategic plan was submitted yesterday. The procurement process was a three-code tendering process, and the award went to Ms. Grace Telmer Company Limited.
I think Dr. Tim Gopi Singh, Mrs. Batiste Primus, and then Mr. David Small. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, when were you appointed as chair of the Self-Help Commission?
I think, Chairman, it's December 2015.
December 2015. Yes. So now it's approximately 27 months that you're on the job as chair.
Yes.
And you said that you meet probably once per month, your board.
Yes, Chairman, but
So
it's also
therefore,
fair to say that we've had special meetings.
Therefore, there should be approximately, if once per month, about 27 board minutes. If that is, you record your board minutes every month. Madam Permanent Secretary, could you give us some elucidation as to how many board minutes you would have had in your possession? And if you weren't receiving these board minutes, what steps did you, or I don't know if you have been there for the 27 months as Permanent Secretary, but while you have been there, what steps did you take to ensure that board minutes were sent to you? How many have you had?
Through Chairman, I can't give you the exact number we have at this time, but we have had an issue with compliance regarding the submission of board minutes from the National Commission for Self-Help. We have written to the administrative head, former CEOs, on several occasions requesting that board minutes be supplied. There are still a number of outstanding periods. We have a database, a spreadsheet where we monitor the submission of minutes, and there are gaps in that monitoring system. So at this point, I can't give you the exact number, but I know that we have not received minutes for every meeting held at the National Commission for Self-Help.
I heard you mention that you wrote to the administrative head and the CEO. Is it not the responsibility of the permanent secretary to liaise directly with the chairman of the board and communicate with the chairman of the board for such minutes if they are not forthcoming? No?
As I understand it, member, the permanent secretary liaises with the operational head of the organization. The minister with responsibility for the state enterprise would liaise with the chairman.
So how many you think that you have received out of the 27 that you?
Probably about 50%.
50%. So something is amiss. And the investments division, how much have you been able to gather from as a monitoring system at the Ministry of Finance on all state enterprises?
Through you, Chair. Member, I can't say offhand. I know we have received some minutes from the National Self-Help, but I cannot say exactly the amount.
So there's something that is missing in terms of the governance process of for example, this state enterprise, and I'm sure we probably may have many, many more that have not come before these committees. As far as I recall, there are about 80 plus state enterprises. So it leaves us to wonder the governance process in terms of understanding what each state enterprise is doing when the minutes are not forthcoming to the permanent secretary. And then when the legal department of the Ministry of Finance, well, the investments division, obviously not receiving the minutes of these meetings to have an understanding and appreciation of what is going on with each state enterprise. Hence the reason I may want to assume, or the listening public may want to assume, that's one of the reasons that we fall down in terms of governance at a national level. So therefore, there is a role for increased surveillance by permanent secretaries on state enterprises and increased surveillance by the investments division of the Ministry of Finance as well, as we have brought up in previous state enterprises that have come before us. So I just wanted to clarify that issue. There's a great deal of weakness in that area, and that is something that from a national perspective on governance, that has to be strengthened. Now, I just want to go to one or two operational aspects, Mr. Chairman. Well, of course, we know that this National Commission started in 1987. And in 1999, you had approval by Cabinet for minor repair and reconstruction grant. And that is to provide senior citizens, destitute families, single parents, and physically challenged persons with an income of less than $3,000 with building materials to effect minor repairs. Then in 2011, you had an emergency relief and reconstruction assistance grant, and that was to provide relief to families affected by fire, storm damage, and land slippage, any other natural disaster, and with material to reinstate and reconstruct the dwelling houses. Then it was also increased to community infrastructural development program. Then to low-cost housing grant was established as well. And in fact, the objectives were to provide assistance to destitute families and so on. I noticed from your report on page 5 of the report that responds to questions by this committee, that in one particular year you had the requests for North Trinidad that is for the MRRG, the Minor Repair and Reconstruction Grant, of 4,058, and for South 3,663, and for Tobago 617. That's approximately 8,000 plus requests. And if I am looking at it carefully, BP means what? If you look at the development program 240. Could you give us an understanding and appreciation of what these 8,000 requests, how much you were able to fulfill during that period of time? At an average, what percentage?
Just press your.
I was going to ask you, your permission, sir, to ask Mrs. Alexander to reply.
Good morning. Could you, of the 8,000 or plus applications that we would have received, we would have possibly entertained, I would say, 30% of these applications.
You entertained, but how much have you been able to complete? And
To complete, we would have completed in the back, in the appendices, we did attach how many applications from those were completed throughout the different avenues, both MRRG, DP, and ERAG. That is included in the appendix.
what appendix are you speaking about? Could you direct us to the appendix?
Appendix 14.
Of which?
NCSHR list of projects and statuses.
Right, what page?
Go right back.
Right, okay. Okay.
Go right back. We use this.
So you approved applications for a number of these. From what I'm seeing, it's less than 25% that you're able to fulfill and complete.
Yes, yes, Chair.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Could you give us an understanding of why you're finding it difficult to be able to fulfill the requests from people who are really seeking the help of National Commission of Self-Help, when out of 4 applications you complete possibly 1 out of the 4?
Our main issue for not completing would be finances, sir.
The finances. Now, your organization looks at water, electricity, construction, roads, and so on, a number of things. Have the board, Chairman, taken any initiative to liaise with these other organizations to see what sort of assistance that they can give you when you have these requests? And do you bring these to the attention of, let's say, WASA, TNTech, Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of Works? When these requests are coming forward and people are waiting and they're really poor and requiring emergency help, and you could only help 1 out of 4, and you have major ministries which can also help, is it the thought process at all for the board or for the administration to begin to work and bring to the attention of the various ministries the requirements of these poor people and see how you can get help for them as quickly when you have not been able to do it?
Chairman, can I just say that I think the character of Self-Help Commission has changed somewhat over the years. The Honorable Mr. Gobi Singh is right in saying that initially there was a lot of emphasis on taking water to rural communities, paving roads, building bridges, retaining walls, although that still remains a need. But over the years, it seems to me, and I've observed Self-Help for a long period of time, that the emphasis has now moved to, whether it is because we are now more developed than we probably than we were then, the emphasis has moved from the community type activity that you have outlined in terms of water and so on, where we took water to a certain point, took the mains there, and then individuals would be responsible for taking it to their homes. And it's now more about individual grants under the ERAG, that is the emergency grants, under the repair grants. But I also want to say, in respect to the overall question that you're asking, sir, that when we assumed office, we also inherited a very large debt to suppliers. And that has played a great role in our ability to function and to work effectively with the suppliers out there, because if these people owed monies, then it was difficult to approach them, to ask them to dispense materials. So that affected us.
Well,
The
you
other
want to
thing-
clear, what was the size of the debt?
I believe it was 11 million or thereabouts, sir. The other thing I want to say, yes, to the question asked by MP Honorable Tim Gopi Singh, that we do liaise with other agencies. At the moment, with regard to the individual grants, we work very closely with the Ministry of Social Development. We have had long relationships with WASA, with TNTech, and the corporations, with agencies like CPEP and so on. So there have been these relationships built up, and they have functioned well. But I have to say, from my observation, the emphasis seems to have moved, I'm not sure it's from a policy standpoint, but just has moved from the community type activity, developing communities, to supporting individuals.
So what would be your core activity that you see as a board at present over the last 27 months, from your perspective?
Yes, our core activity would have been dictated by demand, and therefore we respond as a result, and it was under the emergency relief grants or the repair grants, the minor grants, where we assist people with maintenance of their homes, their roofs, and so on. Those have been the core things, although the board places very highly the issue of community development, because I think it's a fallacy for any one of us to think that we've reached a stage in our country where we don't still have to build bridges for children to cross, leave home, and go to school and things like that. So there are still a few projects like that being undertaken, but in my own view, and that's my personal view, not sufficiently. But I have to say that the overriding issue is that the Commission has had a resourcing problem. We are now tackling how we make that better, how we manage our debts, and how we create relationships with suppliers which can be more effective.
You receive applications of approximately 8,000 per year. I will just be finished in 2 minutes. How do you satisfy the people who are seeking your help? What is the feedback you give to them? And is there any mechanism that you provide of feedback to them? Because citizens say they went to self-help and they got no relief and they don't know what is happening. Then the members of parliament seek some support. They don't get it sometimes from local government or from self-help or whatever. So these citizens remain unaware of what is really happening to their requests. Now, the question is, why don't you take a greater responsibility? You said you liaise with the other organizations. Liaising, we could liaise and get nothing in return. But what is your depth of success, and who do you have in the organization, or what department do you have looking after responding to the needs of the people, particularly when you said you have weaknesses here, beside inadequate funding, time span for approval process. Does the board meet regularly to approve these things that ought to be loss of materials, lack of readiness of the board itself, lack of readiness of the organization, lack of technology for increased operational efficiency, and lack of appropriate skill sets of staff in some areas? Why is it that, knowing these weaknesses, why is it that you're not taking the required steps to strengthen these areas so citizens, the poor citizens, can get the relief that they really want, rather than they know that there is a self-help commission, they apply to them, and nothing is being given to them.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Chairman, I want to say that it's a very frustrating phenomenon to the applicant, the client out there, when they have applied in the hope, and then their hopes are dashed, either because we have not responded in a timely manner, or because we are unable to respond for whatever reason. So I accept that. And so that gap, but the difficulty is how do we bridge the gap? But I'd ask the administrative head to say something about how we deal with clients in terms of letting them know what's happening, because you asked that also. But, you know, we have a problem here. We meet with sufficient frequency to approve applications. But what happens is that there is a build-up between the approval and the implementation, because we come up against a real problem. The real problem is this, that there aren't the resources to implement the decisions taken. Now, we've had meetings. The minister has given us some very helpful suggestions on how we proceed, and we want to address the whole issue of matching resources to approvals in a more business-like manner, so that we don't build up unmanageable debts and have all these problems coming up. But we are tackling them. You have said, well, if you're aware of these problems, why aren't you doing something about them? We are doing something. We are trying to address them, but we come up against resource issues. There are other issues. But I just want to say to you that the Commission is mindful of the points that you have made. The Commission is not unregarding of the need to move forward. And I just ask...
Maybe before, maybe you can put it in writing for us, Ed. And in doing so, just to add to Dr. Tim Gopi Singh's concern, could you give us a detailed breakdown of the distribution for 2016 and 2017 as well? Okay? Mr. Jennifer Baptiste.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to say that I'm sitting here and I am extremely, I can't emphasize enough, I'm extremely disappointed at what I've heard flowed from the chairman of this commission to this committee. Two things. One, Mr. Chairman, you keep changing your statements to this committee. I want to go back to our earlier discussion when you told this committee that the board decided not to fill the position of CEO, but instead to take out some of the functions and create a position of administrative head. Subsequently, you came back and you told this committee that the board agreed for Ms. Phillips to carry out the functions of CEO. Now, the functions of a CEO would have been addressed in a job description. We don't know whether or not Ms. Phillips or any other person in the organization possesses the skills match for that position. Everything I have heard here this morning points to the direction, Mr. Chairman, that you are acting as an executive chairman. Because if there is no clearly identifiable head of the organization, if the board created a position of administrative head, that administrative head is reporting to whom? Not yourself? Good. Now, I see head of finance. Is the head of finance reporting to you? Good. In a healthy organization, the chairman and the board their responsibilities are really setting policy, not getting down into the nitty-gritty of the organizational functions in a healthy organization, so that you would have your head of finance reporting to your CEO. It is the CEO that is accountable to the board of directors for the strategic direction of the organization. Everything I have heard here this morning points to the fact that the commission is a dysfunctional organization. Everything. As the Minister of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, there are 3 boards reporting to me as line minister, and not one of those boards operate based on what I have heard here this morning. Board minutes are sent to the permanent secretary and to the line minister. Any major decisions, the chairman of those boards meet with me as line minister and engages in a discussion. The line minister responsibility is to give guidance to the chair. And clearly, Mr. Chairman, this organization is dysfunctional. I also want to point out, Mr. Chairman, if you would permit me, I am seeing, you see, you have to look at structure, because if your structure is not correct and well-defined, you will achieve very little. The second factor are the people functioning in the structure. Are there synergies? Is there commonality? Is there a common goal that we are all working towards as board members? I see a position, I see Ms. Nicola Humphrey Hamilton, Head of Finance. Is that a position on the structure of the commission?
Chairman, this goes back to what I was saying.
No, I asked a question. With all due respect, Mr. Zephyrin, I would have sat here very patiently. I would have listened to all the responses. I just want to clarify, because you see, you have a team of persons here with you that appears to me not to be the persons who should be facing this committee. So I'm asking again, is the position of head of finance a position on the establishment or a position created by the board?
Created by the board, Chairman.
And then I'm seeing, is it accounts manager? Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Avenel Hendricks. The accounts manager, is that a position on the establishment?
Yes, Chairman.
To whom does the accounts manager report?
To the head of finance.
But that is not a position on the establishment.
Chairman, if I may, the commission operated 2 strands as an organization previous to the commission, to this board taking responsibility. You had what was called a project unit, which was responsible for building communities, which built community centers and did other construction activities. Although that project unit was a part of the commission, it was to some extent separate from the commission. So we inherited the commission where its character would be defined as having a self-help commission, as we know it, and a project unit. But that project unit was coming to the end of its life. Now, it's operated separately to some extent. It was paid separately. It was paid under separate arrangements. But they were all under the same umbrella of self-help. So when that project came to the end of its life, the staff was subsumed into the main. Well, they were always thought to be self-help staff in that way. But in terms of how they were paid, I think they raised their own revenue, or they were paid by the ministry directly for the project unit. I'm not quite sure. But the point I'm making is that there had to be a subsumption of the staff there into the commission staff. So that job title of accounts manager was brought into the main self-help, for want of a better word.
I just want to ask Mrs. Batista, I just want to interrupt for 2 seconds. Mr. Chairman, could you be very honest and open with this committee and tell this committee how many positions under your watch you have created and established without the authorization of the line ministry, the PMCD, the line ministry. How many have been created since you arrived on the compound of the National Commission for Self-Help? That is contrary and in contradiction to the organizational chart or the organizational structure which was approved in 2014. Would you be kind enough to tell us, Mrs. Batiste Primus has identified 2, and we have a third one with in terms of the head or the administrative head. We have 2 additions, 3. Could you tell us how many you have created?
To respond to your question, I don't want to be accused of being dishonest because everything I say here is factual and everything I say here is intended to convey the truth. The positions, as I understand it, and the background to this was when we got...
No, I don't want any background, sir. I am asking a direct question on behalf of the committee. How many new positions you have created? When I say you, the board have created that is contrary to the organization structure which was approved in 2014. Is it 5? Is it 7? Is it 10? Is it 15? Let us know how many.
Them, Chairman. We talked about the head of administration. We created a position of, there was a position on the chart for corporate secretary. We amended that position and we created corporate secretary and legal advisor because when we got to the commission, it was engulfed in a sea of legal issues. That was one. Second one. We also created the position of head of finance when we merged the 2 organizations. And we created one other position, that of grants coordinator, because the small grants of the organization, that is the ERAG and the MRG, was not being properly managed. So we thought we want to pull all of this under one umbrella. Those were the ones. I don't know, have I missed out anything?
Did you create something called a human resource manager?
No, sir.
That was never created.
No, that was always there. Yeah, that was always there, wasn't it? Yes.
Have you created, you have something called an internal auditor within the organization?
Yes. What's the appropriate title? Internal auditor.
But apart from to whom that person reports, could you tell us also, is that on the org chart?
Yes, Chairman.
You have a senior auditor on the org chart as well?
No. We would think, and we didn't want any background, but we were concerned about restructuring the organization. So, but that restructuring never happened in its entirety. Okay? But this, to answer your question, the auditor reports to the Board Audit Committee. That is the arrangement as defined, I think, in the manual. The auditor reports to the Board Audit Committee.
Yes, could I ask the question, to whom this internal auditor reports to?
The internal auditor reports, as I said earlier, Chairman, to the Board Audit Committee. That's a policy
Sorry about that,
arrangement
Mrs.
that's
Batiste
inherited.
Primus. I just wanted to just continue, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So clearly, Mr. Chairman, my fears have been borne out. I would want to suggest, therefore, Mr. Chairman, in terms of our earlier discussion, that the corporate secretary, because Ms. Phillips would have said the corporate secretary would have received an invitation to be here today and a reminder, am I correct? And a reminder. So therefore, Mr. Chairman, I am recommending that that this session be adjourned when you so decide, and when we resume, the corporate secretary be summoned to attend the next meeting that undoubtedly is required. So that's one. Two, Mr. Chairman, I heard Mr. Chairman said that upon assumption to the office, the then new board inherited a large debt of 11 million. Am I correct, Mr. Chairman? All right. What I would want to inquire, when the new board assumed office, you found an $11 million debt. Was there any account of the organization? Did you meet an account?
A breakdown of the debts.
Were there any accounts with monies in those accounts, in those bank accounts? Was there one account, two accounts, three accounts?
Can I just ask answering what accounts we have, please, Chairman?
No. Mr. Chairman, I have directed the chairman, I wrote down what the chairman said. Upon assumption, when he and the board assume, they inherited a large debt of 11 million. If the chairman is in possession of that information and he shared that information willingly with this committee, he must be in a position to state what else the board found when it assumed office.
A slightly different question, Chairman, from what was asked initially.
No, all I ask, it's not different, Mr. Zephyrin. What I ask is, did the board find any accounts with monies in it in the organization? You found 11 million in debt. Were there any account, was there an account or accounts in which there was liquid cash?
Now that I can recollect, Chairman, there was an Abercrombie fund, yes? With, I believe, some $5 million worth of money in that. There's a history to this fund.
So you would have found $5 million.
I'm not sure if that's the exact figure, ma'am, but perhaps that can be verified.
All right, so.
Sorry, I just want a point of clarity. The 2015 accounts identify cash in hand and at bank, an account of 24 million. So I'm just bringing that to the fore, which identifies a First Citizen Bank with 23.9 million in that. That's the account submitted for 2015. So I just want to make that clear on the hand side.
Chairman, can I say that that may well be so, and I would want to provide you with a statement, if that is the case, of what has happened to that money.
In writing give us, Mr. Chairman, a statement of all the accounts and the amounts that you met when you arrived as chairman of the National Commission for Self-Help. We want a detailed breakdown of the amounts, where, in which institution, and what is the current status of those accounts.
Chairman, if you'll permit me, what I would want to add is that what is, in terms of the status, if, as Minister clarified, a little over 24 million, how much of those funds have been spent to date? What were the funds used for specifically? And what was the authority for withdrawal of whatever sums that have been withdrawn to date to be included in that comprehensive response?
I think Sir David Small and then Mr. Hines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to, and Mr. Chairman, through you, I have a cascade of 3 questions. One question is a governance question, one is a policy question, and one is a compliance question. I want to be very methodical about how I'm going to approach this, because I'm troubled. Mr. Chairman, I want to make a short comment also. I want to join with you in saying that what we are seeing here today is that we have a chairman and a board presiding over a completely rogue entity. Okay, and while I was sitting here, I went to the Institute of Directors of the United Kingdom, and I did a search. What are these signs of a rogue board of directors? What happens in some of these signs? The majority votes of the board occur. So the board, rather than having unanimous decision, they have majority votes. You have directors, rogue directors can disrupt the proper function of the staff on the board. Rogue directors divert the company from pursuing its mission. Having rogue directors can also expose the company to legal liability. And rogue directors end up sometimes they're having uncivil behavior at board and committee meetings. So this is not an activity that when we say rogue, I want to always demonstrate that when we say things here at this committee, there's a solid backing for what we say. We don't just dream it up and come up with it. So thank you, Chairman, for putting that on the record. There's a clear body of evidence about what happens to a company or an entity when you have directors flouting the rules and policies. And that is what we're witnessing here. Whether admittedly by doing it deliberately otherwise, the facts on the record today demonstrate that we have an entity that has consistently failed to adhere to the rules and policy, and they've gone completely I think the attorneys call it being on a frolic of their own. So, Mr. Chairman, my first question is a governance question. The chairman of the company here, or the entity here this morning, indicated that on at least one occasion, there's been non-unanimous decisions of the board. And then he's also indicated that probably at least on one occasion, the corporate secretary has been asked to leave the meeting. The legally responsible party to keep notes of the meeting has been asked to leave the meeting. I would like to find out from the chairman and share with this committee and the members of the viewing and listening public. Could you tell us what is your assessment of the status of the working relationship amongst the directors of the company?
Normal. I hear this about all boards taking unanimous decisions. I'm yet to be convinced of that. We have a situation where, in the main, the board agrees generally on all decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And how would you describe the relationship between the members of the board of directors and the corporate sector and other members of management?
There have been troubling issues. There have been troubling issues. The board
Has there been discord amongst the members, Mr. Chairman?
What do you mean by discord?
Disagreements on issues that have elevated to the point where people are taking adverse positions.
Well, Chairman, if there is something that the member wishes me to respond to, if it can be put more directly, I can respond to it.
Right. When you say troubling issues, I am not sure what trouble is. So, okay, let me ask a different question, Mr. Chairman. You said troubling issues. Could you share with this committee one troubling issue?
We are on air, Chairman. So I take it what I'm saying now is being exposed to the national audience. And Right. There have been issues to do with how the board sees staff performing.
Avoid
Any names?
any name calling.
Yeah, I certainly won't call any names, Chairman. But that's why I'm trying to be as deliberate as I can. There are issues where the board feels that it's not happy with the relationship that certain members of staff have, how they treat certain board members, how they address certain board members, and other more material issues to do with their work performance. But since you alluded to relationship issues, I'm trying to answer it in that context. And yes, there have been some tensions. There have been some tensions.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop there. I think that I just wanted to get a sense from the chairman as to whether or not there's a good working relationship, and I'm getting the sense that while they're working through some issues, there are many issues that seem to be, according to the chairman, troubling. But if you have, I would like to posit that where you have a situation where you have a board, there's troubling, quote-unquote, troubling issues between a board and a management, that leads to these dysfunctions in the running of the business. There's no question about that. So I will move from that for now. Mr. Chairman, through you, I have a policy question. I am aware that the chairman put in on the record this morning he has looked at the wonderful performance monitoring manual. And there's on page 98, there's a policy about the issue and use of cell phones and cell phone allowances. And I am now touching my first operational issue in terms of the operation of the business or the entity. And that one of the things that this policy states is that in terms of the heads of the entities have the authority to require the use of cellular phones based on demonstrated need and job function. Let's accept that everyone has read that. I rush now to your document. And according to your document in the submission on page 39, of the 77 staff, 40 are receiving phone allowance, including 5 administrative assistants. So that I am sitting here as someone who's on this Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. I can see where the administrative head, corporate secretary, head of finance can have a phone allowance. But out of a total staff complement of 77 that has been provided here, 40 receive phone allowances, including 5 administrative assistants. So I struggle to, perhaps the way you describe an administrative assistant might be different from my understanding. So I'm seeking clarity on what possesses a state enterprise to provide a phone allowance to an administrative assistant. Could you share with the members of this committee, Mr. Chairman?
Chairman, I agree fully with what Senator Small was saying. We met that problem there. We have curbed it to some extent. We have wanted to remove greater numbers from that provision, but there have been challenges in terms of what has been on offer to the people traditionally. We have, but the position now is a bit amended, if I can say that, because what has happened is that we moved into a new arrangement with TSTT, and because that arrangement provides for a global figure of telephones, it was easier for us to allow more access to the use of phones. But without meandering too much, if I can say that we do agree as a board with the point that you've made, and it's something that we've been trying to address, and given that it's been made again here at this committee, it's something I expect the board in future will be looking at.
May I ask, just to what my colleague has asked, what about the members of the board, Mr. Chairman? Do they have cell phones as well as laptops, as the case may be? What is the situation with the members of the board?
And the first question, the members of the board have no cell phones. The chairman has a cell phone. That, I think, is traditional. When I got into office, I was told that you're entitled to a phone. Blah, blah. took a decision because we found that we were spending a lot of money on ink, on paper. We wanted to move the organization forward, and we wanted to have a situation where we could rely more on the use of the computer to transmit information. And we took a decision at board level to provide each director with a laptop so that we can then move towards that conversion. So in respect of so that was taken. Yeah, that decision was taken, Chairman. And it was, and we are using that to send information to directors. We send minutes, we send documents, and other things. And that was the purpose.
May I ask, when you're taking these very critical decisions where monies are involved in a very difficult environment, would you not agree with me that you ought to communicate that matter in terms of a proposed decision to the permanent secretary of the ministry as well as the line minister? So at least if you're going to expend public funds to provide each member of the board with a laptop, don't you think, because I don't think, from what I recall, that is part of the terms and conditions of board members in the manual that we have. So would you not agree with me, Mr. Chairman, that such a decision would require some consultation with your line ministry? First of all, the minister, and of course the permanent secretary, and then the investments division, seeing that it is not part of the terms and conditions of a member of a board?
In that context, yes, Chairman, with regard to, we had communicated that decision in our minutes, but it's fair to say that it wasn't something that we discussed beforehand with the ministry or the minister. We may have, it wasn't something that was hidden. You know, I may have, even in discussion with the minister, mentioned that as part of the way moving forward in terms of to create greater efficiency at the board level. But it certainly wasn't something that was hidden. And I think, if I may say that the organization has benefited from that, because we certainly could not afford the voluminous amount of paper and ink.
Yeah, but I understand. You see, I keep hearing you saying over and over, we could not afford this, we could not afford that, we couldn't afford the other. This is not a personal arrangement. This is taxpayers' money that we are dealing with here. Now, may I draw to your attention page 20 of the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual. Members, I'm drawing your attention to page 20 of the State Enterprises Performance Monitor. There is an item 3.110, use of cellular phones and laptop computers. Let me read for the record. State enterprises may wish to utilize wireless portable communication devices at the level of the board of directors to enhance the efficiency, as you have said, of the operations. State enterprises may therefore adopt, the policy approved by the government of Trinidad and Tobago on the use of cell phones and laptop computers for the members. Can you tell me whether you're aware of a government policy as it relates to the use of cellular phones and laptop computers for members of boards of directors?
Not explicitly aware before we took the decision to provide members with laptops.
You're not aware, and you didn't seek clarification.
Well, I will have to check where the recommendation came from, but it's fair to say that the board considered the matter and would have ignored that if indeed that policy decision was something that we should have taken.
Now, I want to make it very clear that these things can be provided for job purposes. In other words, if you're a full-time board member or you're an executive chairman, you can go to your line minister, and the line minister can then take the matter to the cabinet, and the cabinet can then adopt a policy. But it is not within your authority and the board's authority to take such decisions, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is another egregious breach of the state enterprises performance monitoring manual, where you have indicated, sir, that you have read it, but yet still, even in reading this manual, you have sought to maybe sidestep, maybe ignore, maybe an oversight on your part, and you have given to all your board members without the authorization of the line minister and the permanent secretary laptops. Now, that is a matter of grave concern. And we would want to indicate to you that having regard to the fact that we are not aware of any policy as it relates to the government of Trinidad and Tobago, saying that each member of a board of a state enterprise ought to be given a laptop and even a cell phone. This is in breach. So I think you have a duty to discontinue this policy because it is not a government-approved policy.
Just want to clarify, Chairman, that I will take what you've said, but the laptop was not given as a gift of ownership to board members alone. It's the property of the commission.
Yeah, but you don't have the authority to do so. That. So we know it will be the property, but at the end of the exercise, you can only exercise that power if there's a policy that gives you that authority, and there is no policy. So again, you have arrogated onto yourself governmental authority by formulating policy that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has not established. So that's the point I'm making. So you need to discontinue this exercise.
I haven't finished, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. You asked one of the questions I'm going to ask, and remember, Mr. Chairman, I stated I had three last questions. One was a governance issue. We're into what I call a policy issue in terms of policies. And I listened to the chairman in his response to the chairman of the committee. I would like to suggest to the chairman that his response that because of the cost of paper and ink, if you assume a decent laptop costs $5,000, and how many directors on the board are there, Mr. Chairman? 10. So let's say $50,000 to purchase laptops for the directors. And a ream of paper is $25, and you go through 10 reams a year per director. I mean, if you do the economics do not support the argument put forward by the chairman. And I just back of the envelope calculation here that doesn't require any mathematical skills on my part. And this is where I am going, that the lack of rigor, there's no rigor in terms of the decisions that are being taken by this board. They have not demonstrated any so far. Decisions are being taken on the basis of I don't know what. And I am always concerned about people spending taxpayers' money without due regard for the fact that they have to be accountable and they have to be prudent in the use of taxpayers' money. Prudency. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask one last question. It's an easy question. And these now go to my other theme, compliance. I have two questions in this area, Mr. Chairman, if you permit me. The internal auditor is here. I believe I have the internal auditor, Mrs. Khan Hamid. Yes. Could you advise this committee, Mrs. Hamid, of whether or not how long have you been the internal auditor? June 2014, so you have some tenure. During your time, have you uncovered any instances of fraud or improper practices at the entity?
Yes, there have been some allegations of fraud that I have.
Would you say it's something that's infrequent, or is it that something that starts to become now a challenge to the company?
It's not frequent, but it comes up from time to time.
It comes up from time to time. And the recommended actions that are supposed to have been taken, you're the internal auditor, you would have made recommendations to treat these matters.
Yes.
Would you say that your recommendations have been adopted by the management?
In some instances, the reports would have been forwarded to the CEO and the board audit committee, and it would have been addressed at some point.
No. I don't accept that. You are the internal auditor. So I would like to get from you, you've investigated a matter, you've made a recommendation. The uptake should be the status of the implementation. There's the ability of management is to ask, this is the recommendation, and let's discuss with you how best you can implement your recommendation. You are the internal auditor. You have the power here. You report directly to the chairman of the audit committee, I understand.
Correct.
That's how it's supposed to be. So that I would like from you, let me rephrase. If you put forward 10 recommendations, what would you say is the percentage of adoption and action by the management on your recommendations?
About 50%.
Okay. So that the auditor is on record as saying, essentially, she's doing her work, and perhaps in terms of half the recommendations, the management hasn't acted. And if you look at the management letters that we have been provided with, you see the same issues repeating every year. And I haven't, so Mr. Chairman, I'm not even going to touch that today. We will not get time to touch that today. So the auditor has borne out what I've seen in the management letters. Just for the record, we read the documentation is provided, and the data is here. I have one last question, Mr. Chairman. No, forgive me, I tend to be succinct. I would like to understand whether or not in the operations of the company, I'm not sure if there's the head of legal is here. Is there any head of legal who's in charge of who? Well, okay. Well, let's see. Well, I would leave that question then for the COP, because the question I have is on legal. Yeah.
Following on the comments and the questions of Senator Small, I would like to ask the internal auditor, in response to his question whether you have found incidents of fraud or, I want to get your words, or improper practices. I noted that you carefully said allegations of. I would like to know whether in the course of your analysis and examination of those, you were satisfied that there was some incidents of fraud. And you would have reported them to the officers. Are you aware as to whether any of those matters were reported to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service?
Yes, some matters were reported.
All right, thank you very kindly, because that is critical, you know. We have to treat with these matters in this country. So the 50% ratio you spoke about this thing. Again, I think it was the chairman spoke about cabinet approval. I have noted, Mr. Chairman, that the minor repair and reconstruction grant was approved by the cabinet in June of 1999. The emergency relief and reconstruction assistance grants was approved by the cabinet in July of 2011. But I have noticed that the Community Infrastructural Development Program, it funds community projects. I see no note as to it being approved by the cabinet. Can you say whether that program, that aspect of your work was ever approved by the cabinet? Thank you very warmly.
Can I request that we
Most certainly.
provide a written response?
I have noticed as well, most certainly, we look forward to that. I've noticed as well the low-cost housing grant was established in March of 2013, prior to your coming to office. The main objective of that program was to provide assistance to destitute families, victims of major natural and other disasters, with the following: a grant of a maximum of 75,000 worth of building materials only, and labor costs is to be met by the applicant or the beneficiary provided by a community-based organization, or a grant to a maximum value of $75,000 worth of building materials for the construction of a starter house, and an additional maximum amount of $45,000 where the cost of labor cannot be met by the applicant, beneficiary, or CBO. I have noticed as well that there is no suggestion that that was approved by the cabinet of the country. That was March of 2013. Are you in a position to say whether that was approved by the cabinet or otherwise?
Chairman, the information I've been given was that that grant was approved by the cabinet. But we'll have to find the documentation to support
Can
that.
you equally then make that available for the benefit of this community? You know,
Yes.
just for ease and simplicity. Let me ask, is that low-cost housing grant still in existence today? Is it practiced today?
It's on the books, Chairman. I think we may have tried to use it in one very desperate case some time ago. I'm not sure if we did. But the most material response I can give is still on the books.
But not very effective in practice.
No, because we haven't had funding specifically devoted to that objective. And two, I think we were seeking to redefine the program a bit. And, you know, we still haven't come up with a new program which we wanted.
I'm very concerned about this because, of course, the government through the HDC has a housing policy where it makes houses available to citizens at significantly subsidized rate, and there's a program for emergency housing and what have you. So I see another HDC coming up inside of here, to me outside of the mandate of self-help to some extent, given that we have a housing policy and a housing ministry, but that is another matter that will have to be addressed at another place and another time. Let me say though, I would like to ask Mr. Chairman, I see in the responses to some of the requests we made for information that you have been awarding contracts, you meaning the Self-Help Commission. From all the programs I see you operate, it is largely about providing materials, and the beneficiary provides the labor or some CBO in the community or so. That was the core idea here. In what circumstances does self-help find itself issuing contracts? I'm talking about in those kinds of programs, if it exists.
Chairman, it is very fair to say that the original concept of self-help included a provision for these kinds of assistance, that we provided materials, but that the labor was found either from the community. The sweat equity, as it is called, is a decline in a kind of resource. Sometimes something is needed in a community, but you can find no one to do it. You may find particular individuals who are challenged either physically or otherwise, who've applied for a grant, but then they can find no one to assist them. So, Mr. Hines is right. The rule is that it's material only. The exception is, in certain justifiable instances, we provide a full grant. Community projects tend to be one of those, because one of the things that's happened today, as you would realize, and I'm sure you'll share this, is that there's less and less of a desire for people to contribute in a communal sense. So, for example, if you're building a bridge in a particular area, you may well have to, because the older people might be the ones benefiting from it in the main, and the other people are not prepared to put any labor in. So, yes, I agree that the whole notion of how these projects are funded and how they're financed have shifted somewhat.
So in effect, and for the benefit of the viewers who might find the language we use here a little bit above easy understanding, you're saying that persons apply to the National Self-Help Commission. The National Self-Help Commission is prepared to put the materials for the job in. But the persons who have made that application for self-help are now telling the Self-Help Commission, we really don't have anybody to do the work. And therefore, the Self-Help Commission comes in now and issues a contract to somebody in the community to do the work. That's effectively what you're saying?
To some extent, Chairman, what would happen is that an appraisal will be undertaken of the application, and the appraisal will include the ability to complete the project or to implement the project. So that will be so. There are some other special projects where it is felt that professional involvement is required.
Pause. But doesn't the self-help as part of the establishment have technical supporting officers, officers who will go out there and can provide technical support to the community in the process of the community development, if I may use that term loosely?
The position is theoretically yes.
All right, may I?
All right, before we
No, I know.
Yeah, before we go, I would simply like to know, and we can take this one in writing, an indication as to how many such contracts would have been issued in the last, say, from the establishment, well, let me say from 2011 to the present date. Can we look forward to that, Mr. Chairman? Yes, I would like to see how many contracts have been issued and the extent of those contracts, the contract prices. That will help me as a member of this committee in no small measure.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we are about to conclude our meeting, but in doing so, I have one or two areas I'd like to have clarified. This committee requested a copy of the internal audit findings that you conducted, that is the National Self-Help Commission, for the period May to September 2017. We are yet to receive that internal audit report. Can you provide that report to us forthwith, sir, by this evening? If you could send that to this committee. And at the same time, if you could provide this committee with an account of how many investigations or special audits have the Self-Help Commission conducted, either internally or externally. Could you give us a detailed account of those? And could you put in writing for us how many litigation cases are outstanding and the total sum of legal liabilities existing within this organization between the period January 2017 to the present time? And could you finally put in writing under what circumstances was the investigation or special audit conducted into what is called the MRRG? I think it's Minor Repair and Reconstruction Grants, number 8147, involving one Nazir Ali. Now, Mr. Chairman, in closing, I just have a few remarks to make because I won't ask you to close or to make any closing remarks because we are going to have you here next week on the committee. What we'd like to suggest is the following. We are going to summon the corporate secretary at the next meeting. We are going to summon the former CEO, who is now on administrative leave, at the next meeting. And we wish to serve notice that this committee will be inviting the entire team, including yourself, for a second part because we have so many outstanding matters and we have a timeline that we have to satisfy. And therefore, we'll be convening with the support of our committee members next week, Wednesday, at the same time. So we'll be writing you accordingly to come in so that we can try to conclude that exercise next week, Wednesday. So what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, at this time, if you like, in closing, you may want to make a few closing remarks because we'll be continuing, as I said, next week at the same time. Would you like to make a few closing remarks?
Chairman, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to clarify some of the issues that we have been handling over the last 27 months or thereabout. I want to say that we have taken note where it's quite clear the provisions of the State Enterprise Manual have not been strictly adhered to, and that we will address those issues with some urgency. We take a very positive, notwithstanding the fact that, we were grilled, which we expect to be. We don't take a negative view of what has happened here this morning. It's quite instructive in a lot of stuff that has been said. And where we can, as far as we can, we will act immediately. Thank you.
Let me just say in closing that our responsibility, Mr. Chairman of the National Commission for Self-Help, is simply to assist the organization become more efficient, more effective, more economical, more accountable, and we want value for the public's money. That is what we are about. And we hope that when we conclude our next meeting, we'll be able to have some further clarification on areas of concern that we'll put to you and to others. So at the end of the day, we can produce recommendations to the Parliament and through the Parliament to the line minister for improving the operations, overall efficiency and efficacy of the National Commission for Self-Help. So on behalf of our committee, let me thank, I recognize my colleague.
It's unusual and I'm most thankful. And I would like to express my own personal, through you, Mr. Chairman, gratification at the very humble and respectful response of the chairman to your suggestions on our behalf. I would like to record his graciousness in these circumstances. Felt obliged. Thank you. Through you.
Thank you very much. So we look forward to resuming our discussion next week. At the same time, we'll be writing to you formally and the team. So I want to thank the team from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division. I'd like to thank the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Community Development, Gender, and the Arts, as well as the entire team from the National Self-Help Commission for being here. I'd like to thank members of the public, members of the media for being here. And at this particular point in time, these proceedings are adjourned. Thank you very much.